Welcome to the Cold Case Christianity broadcast, the only Christian case-making program hosted by a cold case homicide detective. J. Warner Wallace has been investigating cold case murders in Los Angeles County for over a decade. His work has been featured on Fox News, Court TV, and Dateline. For more information about Jim's work and the case for Christianity, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. Now, here's your host, J. Warner Wallace.
Thanks for joining us at Cold Case Christianity. I'm J. Warner Wallace. Today I'm back in my office, an office that I just did a kind of a quick remodel of, and actually even bought a better camera, hopefully, to do these. You know, years ago, actually for about 7 years, I had a podcast that we did at coldcasechristianity.com, and before that we were at pleaseconvinceme.com. And many of you who listen to this podcast or watch this broadcast at NRB Network are familiar with that. You've been following us and listening to these podcasts for 7 years. And before I started doing this broadcast, the podcast was about maybe an hour and a half, hour and 15 minutes. And so we shifted when NRB contacted us and asked, would you be willing to create a video version of your weekly show, but it needs to be 28 minutes. Well, that's a little bit tough for us, and trying to figure out how do we, navigate this and get it down to 28 minutes. Well, we've managed to find a way to do that. I hope you've enjoyed these shows over the last, this is our 26th show, but we started off just doing it with a HD webcam. And we've just taken one step up from that right now. We're going to be using a GoPro in order to film all of these, to tape all of these shows going forward for a while. And as I play back the video, I noticed, wow, it shows a little more detail than I'd like to show. I realize how old I am. Every little line and crease in my face now shows on these high-def GoPro cameras, but you'll just have to make do with that. What we're going to do, and I've used this office that I'm taping in, that I've used this office for years to actually work many of the cold cases that I made a living as a cold case detective solving these cases, and I used a lot of this office for the most part during that entire time, unless I had to go out, of course, and do an interview or make an arrest or to serve a search warrant. Otherwise, for the most part, I was here putting the evidence together, piecing the puzzles together, 1 year after another, solving all those cases. Now, I can tell you, you learn a lot about truth and the nature of truth and why it's so important for us to understand the nature of truth when we make cases that you're eventually going to have to present in front of a jury. And if your juries if the jurors on your juries don't understand the nature of truth, the exclusive nature of truth, well then trust me, you're going to have a problem getting them to come to a decision about your defendant and the nature of the case against your defendant. Turns out that the nature of truth is critical when working homicide trials. Well, it's also critical for those of us who are examining the claims of Christianity or the claims of any theistic worldview that proposes a certain truth about the nature and existence of God. So I want to do a series, we're going to start this week, talking about the nature of truth and why it's so important for you and I to have a firm understanding of the difference between subjective truth claims and objective truth claims. And we're going to start that this week, and then we'll continue that over the next several weeks. The reason why I'm taking the time to do this is because I sense that there's a reason why so many of us are hesitant to share what we believe about God. And if you're a Christian watching this show, that your pastor and your church probably do spend some time talking about why it's so important for you to evangelize, for you to share what you believe about God, about Jesus. But if you're like me and like many others in the church, you probably don't spend as much time doing this for real as you might like. It's one thing to talk about sharing your faith. It's another thing to actually do it. As I've kind of traveled around the country and taught on this topic, and actually led missions trips that were highly evangelistic, I should say. Well, I can tell you, I've noticed that there are a couple of inhibitors that will slow people down or will keep people from wanting to share the truth. And these inhibitors end up being something we can actually deal with, because often it comes down to what you believe about the nature of truth. So this is something we want to talk about foundationally, not just because we want to academically parse out what's the definition of truth. That's all well and good. But I think we need to talk about this because it's actually one of the factors that keeps us from sharing what we believe is our mistaken notions related to the nature of truth. It turns out there are two kinds of truth claims: subjective truth claims and objective truth claims. Subjective truth claims are simply opinions. They're rooted in the subject who holds them. That's why they're called subjective. Objective truth claims, of course, are objectively held because they are rooted not in your opinion, they're rooted in the nature of the object itself. So rather than being rooted in the subject, they're rooted in an object, and that's why we call these objective claims. Now let me give you an idea of how I think this inhibits us as we share the gospel and why I think it's so important for us to get this truth claim right. You know, as I travel from church to church on Sundays and speaking about the nature of Christianity and the case for the reliability of the Scripture, I will sometimes ask church members, hey, would you be willing to go with me into the local town nearest us, wherever we happen to be in America, on a short-term missions trip? You know, these are pretty popular in the church. Many of us have already gone on a short-term missions trip of one nature or another. So I think that it's not unusual for us to get involved in this kind of trip. And we know from our past experience working in the church and serving in the church that these kinds of missions trips are going to usually cost you something. They're going to cost you a few dollars to cover the cost of transportation. If you're going to bless a missions organization on the ground wherever you're going, you're going to want to bring a donation to help them. You're going to have to pay for meals, those kinds of things that'll be a part of the cost. So let's say I told you that, hey, folks, we want to take a missions trip tomorrow, and I want to see all of you who are really love God and who want to share what you believe. I want you to come with me, and it's going to cost you, you know, a small cost of $15, $20 to go for 4 or 5 hours, and we'll go downtown. It will take 4 or 5 hours of your day. So short-term missions trips require both a financial component and a component of your time, a time commitment. But we're going to do it for a good cause. We're going to go downtown and share the truth with people who are still have not heard it. They are unaware of this truth claim, and we want to share this truth with them. A lot of our brothers and sisters in Christ, when hearing such a proposal, would say, yeah, I'd be willing to go on that kind of a trip. I'll be happy to go downtown with you and share the truth. But hang on a minute. The truth we're going to share is going to be, what is the best dessert? In other words, we're going to go downtown and share the truth about your favorite dessert. Now, when I put it that way, most people would say, what? That's a silly trip altogether. Why would I want to spend my time and money to try to convince somebody else of my favorite dessert? To be honest with you, I don't even have a desire. Now, I have a favorite dessert. As a matter of fact, I can tell you that almost everywhere I travel, if I'm in an airport, or I'm at someone's house, or I'm in someone's church, and there's somebody who's made homemade chocolate chip cookies, oh, trust me, I'm going to eat all that I can eat. And if no one's looking, I'm going to eat 3 or 4 more, because I have a weakness for chocolate chip cookies. Those, to me, are the best form of sweets, desserts. Chocolate chip cookies rule in my book. And so I've got a weakness in that area. So if I was going to go downtown and share the truth about the best dessert, well, that would certainly be the truth about chocolate chip cookies. That would be the thing I would want to share with people. But let me ask you a question. How many of you be willing to give up your time and your money to share a truth claim about cookies? I think very few of you would be willing to do that, because you automatically recognize, even if you haven't really thought about the difference between subjective and objective truth, you recognize that this claim about cookies is completely a matter of opinion. It's a subjective claim. And none of us is willing to go out of our way, typically, and really kind of go out on a limb or suffer any kind of hardship to share truth about subjective opinions like cookies. Or maybe yours is cheesecake, or it's chocolate cake, or it's ice cream of some nature. Whatever your favorite dessert is, I doubt that you're going to be willing to spend a lot of time, effort, and money trying to convince others of it. After all, everyone's entitled to their own opinion about such things. And that's my point, really. It turns out that most of us are not willing to go out on a limb. But let me ask you, for a subjective truth claim, but let me ask you, what if I told you the thing we're going to share with people is not going to be your favorite dessert? Instead, we're going to share the truth with a group that really needs to hear the truth, because there's a group downtown, as it turns out, that's actually dying of tuberculosis. TB is on the rise, especially here in Southern California. And there are lots of folks who've contracted TB and don't even know they have it. And the symptoms of this hearty cough and the thing that actually, infects your lungs and all of this, they don't even understand the seriousness of what they've got. And they're treating this thing with cough syrup and NyQuil or whatever the brand is they're using. And they're hoping that, they're eventually going to get over this chest cold they think they have. When in fact, what they have is TB. And not only do they, if they're coughing and they have TB, they're active in a way that they're actually passing TB on to others. And that's why this thing will spread. Because they don't know that there's a cure for TB. They don't even realize they have TB. Now, if I told you we were going to take a mission trip downtown, and it was going to cost you 15 or 20 bucks and take 3 or 4 hours of your time, but we're going to be sharing the truth about the cure for TB with a people group that are dying of TB, and their kids are also dying of TB, would you be willing to make that kind of trip? Yeah, I think you would, because this is about a cure. And it turns out there is a 4 antibiotic cocktail that includes an antibiotic called isoniazid that is required in order to cure TB. And my opinion, it's not my opinion that this is what cures TB. This truth claim is an objective truth claim because the truth of its cure value is rooted in the object itself, the antibiotic. So you may have an opinion that says, I don't like to take shots from antibiotics. I'd rather just take a cup of cough syrup. Well, your opinion about cough syrup is not going to change whether or not cough syrup can cure TB. It turns out that the cure is independent of your personal subjective opinion. The cure is rooted, and the truth value of the cure is rooted in the cure itself. It's an objective claim. Now, I think most of us, even those of us who would be hesitant to go downtown to share the truth claim about cookies, would be quick to share the truth claim about the cure for TB. I actually caught TB as an officer arresting a suspect years ago, and I was in my early 40s. And back in those days, if you were over 40 and you contacted or contracted TB, which I have, they wouldn't even treat it unless you go TB active. I'm TB positive, but I'm not TB active. So I'm always looking to make sure that this isn't activating, but the odds of activating after the age of 40 are pretty slim. But my point here is, if you know somebody who's got TB and they're TB active and they're dying from TB, I don't think you'd hesitate for a second to go downtown and actually share the truth about this cure, because you know that that's not a matter of subjective opinion. It's not like cookies. This is very different. You'd be willing to go for that trip, especially if young kids are involved and this is spreading. You'd want to go downtown because this is about not a matter of opinion. This is about an objective cure for what's killing them. Now, my question, of course, is, how is it that we see the gospel of Jesus Christ? Do we see it as an opinion? And, I know friends who are Baha'i and friends who are Mormons, and I have family that are Mormons. I have friends that are Muslim or friends that are Buddhists. I mean, they've all got their own view of God, and why would I want to take away? It's all a matter of opinion anyway, and since they've got their opinion about God and I've got my opinion about God, is the truth about God subjective or objective? If it's subjective like cookies, then I can understand why you wouldn't want to go downtown and waste a lot of your time when everyone's opinion is everyone's opinion and no one's opinion is more valuable than anybody else's. On the other hand, if the truth about God is rooted in the nature of God, rooted in the object under consideration, if it's an objective claim, well, then this is not about going downtown like trying to share what you believe about cookies. This is going downtown to try to share desperately the truth of the cure for what's killing us. So the question I typically ask my audience is, and I'm asking you today, have you been treating the gospel like a cookie rather than a cure because you've kind of really not thought deeply about what the difference is between subjective claims and objective claims? And if our beliefs, our metaphysical beliefs about the nature of reality and the nature of God's existence are simply a matter of an opinion, well, then they're just purely subjective, and I can see why you'd be hesitant. On the other hand, if they're objective claims, we ought to be animated to share what we believe, because there's risk involved if we don't. Not for ourselves, but for those who don't know God. And that's what we're going to talk about today and for the next 2 or 3 weeks, is the nature of truth and what are the categories of truth in terms of different categories of objective truth claims. I've already done a show here about the lies that the culture will tell us about the truth. You can search for it in the archive, either here at the NRB Network or on my YouTube page where I've archived all of these NRB shows. So you can find it one of two places. But that's what we'll be talking about for the next couple of weeks. Now I'm going to take a quick break, and when I come back, I want to share with you a couple of thoughts about the unique nature of Christianity when it comes to the different kinds of truth claims that are out there about the nature and existence of God. And we'll do that right after the break.
In addition to Jim's daily blog and weekly podcasts and videos, Jim continues to write books designed to help you become a better Christian casemaker. At coldcasechristianity.com, you'll find a link to Cold Case Christianity, a homicide detective investigates the claims of the Gospels, and Alive, a cold case approach to the resurrection. These resources will help you defend what you believe and share it with others. Be sure to visit the Cold Case Christianity website daily to read Jim's blog, watch the weekly video, or listen to the Cold Case Christianity podcast. You'll also find great free resources, including the free downloadable monthly Bible insert. While you're there, be sure to sign up for Jim's daily case note email. Cold Case Christianity is designed to help you become a better Christian casemaker. Need a speaker for your next conference, retreat, training seminar, or church service? Jim travels around the country, making the case for the existence of God, the deity of Jesus, and the reliability of the Bible. He'd love to partner with you to create a powerful, transformational training experience. Just visit the Cold Case Christianity website and click the Book Me tab. You'll find everything you need to know there, including a list of Jim's speaking topics, promotional materials, Jim's speaking calendar, and a link to connect with our team so we can book your event. Connect with Cold Case Christianity on social media. Visit the Cold Case Christianity homepage and click the social media icons on the top right toolbar. Jim is active on Facebook and Twitter, posting the best apologetics articles from over 250 Christian blogs around the country. You'll also find links to Jim's Instagram, Pinterest, and Google Plus accounts, along with the link to the Cold Case Christianity YouTube page. Stay connected with Cold Case Christianity and become a better Christian casemaker.
Okay, I want to talk about now the nature of truth related to Christianity, because I think that it's actually very unique. Christianity is very unique amongst other theistic worldviews in terms of its claims related to truth. And here's what I mean by that. Christianity is based foundationally on a claim about an event in the past, in history. The life, ministry, death, crucifixion of Jesus, his resurrection. These are things that are events that allegedly occurred in the past. And because they are claims about an historical event, they can actually be examined in a way that other claims can't be. So for example, if I hold a Near Eastern view of God, which is really built on a series of proverbial statements about the nature of God, but not necessarily on an event that occurred in the past, well, that's an awfully difficult view to falsify. I mean, how would I even begin to do such a thing? If I told you, for example, that I had a vision yesterday of God in which he told me X, Y, and Z, how would you really be able to test that? I mean, you'd have to either take my view of this or take my word for it or not. If on the other hand I told you that yesterday I was visited by God, who personally walked into my backyard and we rearranged the furniture in my backyard, and we dug a ditch to lay a new irrigation system, and we built a fort up on my hill. You know, if I told you all these things, claims about the actual behavior of God in my backyard at a point in time, that's very different. That's an historical event that we could probably find some way to test forensically or test with some kind of historical methodology. And that's what's unique about Christianity. It's not just a claim about God, it's a claim about God interacting with us at a point in history. And because it's that kind of claim, we can actually apply to it a process that we can't apply to other systems. You could not apply this same process to Hinduism or to Buddhism, but you can apply this process to Christianity because, in fact, it's based on an historical event, or the claim at least is based in an historical event. Now, There are other theistic worldviews that are similarly based, and let's face it, Mormonism is a claim about the historic past. Islam is a claim about the historic past in many ways. So we could test those. But as it turns out, it's not just that Christianity is verifiable or falsifiable, either way, depending on how you look at it. It's that it passes the test of verification. Yes, anything that is a claim based on something that happened in the past is either verifiable or falsifiable by some set of principles. But not only is this the case for Christianity, when you apply the test, and I've described this 4-part test in Cold Case Christianity, I talk about it a lot at my website, coldcasechristianity.com, and we've talked about it here on this show. When you apply that 4-part test to the claims of Christianity, you know what you discover? It passes the test. And other competing views suffered in the same. This is my own personal story, folks. When I first became interested in Christianity, I was 35 years old. And I was a very, I think, well-spoken, of course this is arrogantly said, I'm sure, I think I was a pretty thoughtful atheist. I was somebody who I knew enough about what my views were that I could argue with you. If you wanted to argue for Christianity, I'd be happy to do so. And I held a kind of obstinate, informed atheism for many years. And when I first became interested in any theistic claims, the claims of Christianity, my family, many of whom are Mormons, the rest are all atheists, but my Mormon family came to me, and I got a Book of Mormon immediately. As a matter of fact, I read through the Book of Mormon, Doctrines and Covenants, and Pearl of Great Price at the same time I was reading the Old and New Testament. And as somebody who had no idea what was Scripture and what wasn't, what I could trust, what I couldn't trust, I was really skeptical, to say the very least, of all the Scriptures, Christian and Mormon. I just tossed them all. I just thought, well, I'm looking for some proverbial statements. If Jesus really lived, he may have said some wise things. I'm willing to kind of limit my investigation to those wise sayings, the same way I might collect fortune-cooking sayings of Buddha or of Baha'u'llah or of any other Socrates or any other historic philosopher. I'd be more than happy to collect that wisdom. But as I use that 4-part process that I describe in the book, I describe on the website, it verified the Gospels at the same time that it falsified the Book of Mormon. Because that process I've described will do one of two things. It's just going to look at this thing kind of forensically, and as you look at these claims forensically, with the process that we use when we examine any claims of 30 years ago related to a murder, for example, it's either going to falsify or verify. And I became very comfortable with what I was seeing in the Gospels in terms of their verifiability, even as I became less and less comfortable with the claims of Mormonism in the Book of Mormon. And I always say that I became a Christian on the same day I became a not Mormon. And I don't say that sarcastically. What I mean is both of these systems are rooted in claims about the distant past. So therefore both can be verified in the same way or falsified in the same way. And one system holds up even as the other crumbles. And that's my point, folks. We have a very unique claim about God in that it is falsifiable or verifiable because of the nature of its claim. And that's why I felt that the process that I use to look at any event in the past related to a murder would also apply in some ways really very well to the investigation of this ancient event. And although it's 2,000 years older, the same set of tools I think will work in both of these. So that's my whole point about this, is that this is not just a truth claim. It's first of all, it's an objective truth claim, which is why we ought to be animated about sharing it. If it really is true, we ought to be animated about doing. If you didn't share the cure for a disease that you knew was killing your friends or even your strangers in your town, and you knew you had the cure for what's killing them, and you didn't share that cure with them, this is not like sharing your favorite cookie. You would be actually, I think, perceived as an evil person for not sharing what you knew was the cure. That's my whole point. That's what this is all about. If we decide, and we know that this is an objective claim. Now, we're going to talk more about this next week, about how we can categorize things between subjective claims and objective claims, and where do claims related to metaphysical claims about the nature of reality, the nature of God's existence. Where do these fall on the spectrum of objective and subject? I'll give you a little giveaway, okay, for next week. These kinds of claims about God, I'll demonstrate why next week, are objective claims about reality. Therefore, they fall in the same category as cure claims. And you ought to be treating with the same kind of urgency and the same kind of primacy in how you share those claims. And that's what I think the problem is we have right now in the church. For the most part, we're living in if you're here in America, you're living in a very pluralistic, relativistic culture. And the politically correct thing to say is that everyone's view is every bit as valid and as true as anyone else's view. And what kind of a person are you if you think that your view is somehow exclusively true to the expense of other claims which you would say are false? Oh my gosh, that's a very arrogant position to take in our culture today. Wouldn't you agree? But if that's the case, if this is seen as a view that of truth, if exclusive views of truth are rejected, then don't be surprised that every theistic claim about the nature of God is going to be seen as just a matter of personal taste. It's all subjective. And that's why you ought to shut up, Mr. Christian or Mrs. Christian. You ought to shut up about your claims, because the reality is we don't want to know what your opinion about dessert is. We don't care that you like chocolate chips. We don't really care. Don't push that on us. Don't continue to harp on us that we ought to like chocolate chip cookies. You see how crazy that would be, right? And if the world sees these kinds of claims in the same category, they're going to think you're just as crazy for trying to share what you believe about Jesus with them. On the other hand, we see them, and we ought to be seeing them as, my gosh, do you realize without Jesus, your future, because we are eternal creatures, is doomed. It turns out that Jesus is the cure for what's killing all of us, because what's killing us is our problem that no one wants to talk about, sin. So it turns out that this is an objective claim about the cure. And that's why we need to be sharing it with incredible urgency. So I want to encourage you to see the difference and to watch this week, next week, and maybe the week after as we talk about the nature of truth, so you can have a firm grasp on how you can share this truth with others. We're in 2015, folks, and by the time you watch this, it might be much later than that. It might be 2016. And there's no time in a culture that is less and less Christian by the day. We can either decide to let it vanish, to let it become the minor voice in the culture, to let it become a voice that has no influence in the culture, or we can begin to make the case for what we believe. No one wants to make a case for chocolate chip cookies, but I am willing to make the case for the cure, and I hope you are too. That's it for this week. I hope you'll join us again here next week at Cold Case Christianity.
Thanks for joining us at the Cold Case Christianity broadcast. If you're interested in more information about this week's topic, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. For a thorough investigation of the reliability of the New Testament Gospels and the case for Christianity, be sure to purchase Cold Case Christianity. A homicide detective investigates the claims of the Gospels. It's available wherever books are sold.